I'm Josh Allen, and welcome to the Baked In Podcast, where I sit down with industry innovators to uncover the unique ideas and values that are baked into their businesses and have led to extraordinary success. This podcast is presented by Busey Bank. Since Busey opened their doors in 1868, they've upheld a pledge to foster customer relationships and vibrant communities, embodying a legacy of partnership and progress. With multiple lines of business, Busey provides a range of financial solutions tailored to your needs. From digital banking to planning for retirement, Busey is here to help you achieve your financial goals. Busey Bank, building business, growing wealth since 1868. Today's episode is one of my favorite humans, Mark Spewak, a passionate coach, entrepreneur, and the driving force behind the most connected running community in the region. Through his personalized coaching programs and unwavering support for runners of all experience levels, Mark has built more than just a business, he's built a movement. His approach is much more than just about race times or personal bests. It's about fostering a sense of belonging, perseverance, and personal growth. In today's conversation, we'll explore how his own journey as an athlete and a mentor inspired him to create a community that empowers others to achieve their goals, both on and off the road. Let's roll. What we were talking about.
No. Well, I would imagine.
Oh, but so anyway, he was there. He was at Stanford.
At
and then
that
he went
same
to
time.
He went to Wash U.
Okay.
He's now the city ortho, I think.
Cool. Okay.
But he basically said, look, there's just no real reason to run when there's so many other things.
You talk to, a lot of doctors that like you run into, it's 50-50. Because I'll have clients who have these huge injuries and they'll go to one doctor and the doctor will say, you're never running again. Then they go to another doctor who has a fitness background that's like, if you modify things and you change the way that you do it, you can run. And I think it's like,
but that's what they all say. You can run.
Yeah.
Like if you choose to do it, we'll figure out how to do it. It doesn't mean that's what you should be doing.
I think that, I think you just have to, if you feel like, here's what I always suggest people. If you're in one of those situations and you're not having any pain when you run 3, 4, 5 miles, then do it a couple times a week. Supplementing, cross-training, do other stuff, and then just let go of the big goals. It's more, I think, that the people that are like, I have to hang on to the marathon.
Right.
I have to hang on to these races. And then
those
it's like
big goal. I mean, it's for guys like me.
It's an awesome goal to have.
Right. You put the carrot out there. This is what's going to get me out of bed every morning because I signed up for this freaking 50-mile run, and that's what's going to get me.
Which is tough. I mean, that was a big one that you did.
So I want to talk about resilience a little bit, and so. I read a little bit about your injury. So when I started running with you guys a handful of years ago, you were only on your bike in the morning. You would kind of you'd ride alongside the group and talk. And I don't think even then you're incredibly humble about the challenges that you're facing. So I never really understood it. Can you tell me a little bit about sort of what that injury, I want to lead into resilience and as it relates to coaching and how you lead a team, but I'm interested in sort of just putting that context together in terms of what health challenges you faced in the last handful of years.
Yeah, well, it kind of, honestly, my mentality all starts off when I was born. So when I was born, like a month into being alive, I got the whooping cough, which I wasn't old enough to get the vaccine for, which is called pertussis. And it nearly killed me. Actually, it was to the point where, my parents were already kind of starting to think, am I even going to live?
And your dad's a pediatrician.
Yeah, he's a pediatrician. So. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. My dad actually was the one that kind of kept pressing the doctors and the ER doctors to look at pertussis and to look at some of these other tests, and they kind of thought he was crazy. They're like, he's just really sick with something or whatever the case was. And so as a result of having pertussis, I had these seizures that I was dealing with as a baby. And when you have seizures as a baby, that obviously causes damage in your brain. And so miraculously was able to recover and obviously live through that and be totally fine from a physical aspect, but I had a lot of learning disabilities because of it. And so that was kind of the beginning of my life, and then how I kind of went through school. And so sports was always something that I really connected well with. I also have the ability to be social, and the ability to be able to, maybe from not.
You think that's a function of the illness?
No, sorry. I more mean in the sense that I don't present as somebody that has a lot of learning disabilities, and I never did, I think, growing up in school, unless you're actually in a classroom with me. And I just learned how to kind of compensate for that and get really strong at like, just the aspect of working really hard and focusing on just more of the strengths that I had. And my mom was somebody who, like, she was very tough on me. And she was always like, "You never going to use this as an excuse." Like, she was like, she never allowed me to use like having a learning disability as an excuse.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because my middle daughter, Molly, super successful kid, she has some learning disability.
Okay, yeah.
But she was so nice,
Yeah,
and so approachable and so social that the teachers didn't really believe it, because she knew how to ask questions and advocate for herself, and she was willing to do it. And so she sort of that was the crutch to sort of get her through all of that in a way that was really cool to see. And she's graduated from college. She's successful.
Amazing.
She's a wonderful young woman now, but she had that sort of same thing where people didn't really recognize it because she had those social skills and that ability to sort of kind of work her way around it.
And that's incredible. And I think a lot of people obviously struggle with something in school. So I wasn't unique in the sense that, I had challenges, just more of, I think, my mom ingraining this mentality in me that it was about work ethic and about like kind of focusing more on, you need to almost outwork this. You need to focus on controlling what you can control. That mentality was just with me. So when it got to like my competitive sports career, I had my ups and downs when it came to cross country and track in high school. And then when I got into college as well, I actually failed out of college after my freshman year and was running at a small Division I school and lost my opportunity to be there. And so that was kind of my first taste of, you had an opportunity, you blew it, and now you're kind of back at square one. And so over the years, even if it wasn't an injury, I had kind of all these little...
so what did you do? I mean, just because I'm interested.
Yeah.
From a resilience standpoint. So you're out of school, you're out of that one. Did you go back to school somewhere else?
Yeah,
so keep running?
I came back to St. Louis. I got a job at a Big River Running Company, a store here in town. And I just kind of said to myself, I remember I drove home, I think it's like almost a 20-hour car ride from where I was in New Jersey. And I kind of said to myself on that way home, I was like, you are going to feel bad for yourself on this car ride home. And then when you hit the pavement in St. Louis, you're going to move on and you're going to figure your life out and you're going to get over this and you're going to be fine. And I remember I got home and I probably waited a week or two, still felt bad for myself. And then I really started to realize, okay, like got a job at Big River and just kind of focused on, got into community college at Merrimack and really just tried to rebuild my life. And that was really the goal right there. And that first year had a ton of success with my own personal running. I ended up training on my own, working at the store, getting involved with all the community events. And so at 19 years old, I kind of really got a kickstart on my career, which was amazing because at that time, instead of being in that traditional college setting, I was still getting college classes, but I was able to, instead of having a social life, I was supplementing that with the work aspect, things that obviously you can understand and relate to, sure. I'm sure, when you started off baking. And so that kind of set the stage for everything. So fast forward years later, when it comes to just my recent health issues, for years, like when I was competitively training, I got injured a lot, and I'm very vocal about why I got injured. A lot of it was that I didn't strength train, and how many times do coaches tell you need to strength train consistently and all the rest of the stuff, and you just didn't do it. And so when I was in my peak, I had some great years of running, but I never really made it through a full year. And so I was always constantly like having to go in the pool, having to get on the bike. And so I really, like, over the years kept really having to keep teaching myself how to keep going, keep pushing. And that really comes back, I feel like, to how I started my life off. This entire life is just about being the comeback kid, and so it's something that I really kind of embraced. And so finally, I get to the year, I think it was 2021, and it was right after COVID. I had made a huge comeback in my running. I was fitter than ever. During COVID, I feel like people either got really fit and really inspired, or it was the opposite. For me, I got really fit, really inspired, having the best running of my life, just felt so strong and was like, I'd met Katie about a year before. I was like, this is going to be my year. I'm in my late 20s. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to really make an even bigger jump. And I woke up one day, it was the spring of 21, and I couldn't move my legs. And I was like, this is weird. Like, is this in my head, or whatever the case was? And so I finally was able to wake up, get up, and my legs were just dead. They just felt like I was dragging around cement. And then it just was weird.
And nothing you had ever had.
Nothing I ever had before. Hands were falling asleep, just weird things. And what was odd about it was like I wasn't really training any harder before this. It wasn't like I had like, some incident that made this happen. It really just kind of started as I woke up, and this is kind of how I felt. And leading up to it, now that I look back, there were some nerve flare-ups and things like that in the months before, but nothing to the degree of what I was going through. So long story short, I'm dealing with, this kind of weird feeling, and I take about a month off, start getting a lot of tests, doing the MRIs and everything. And really they couldn't conclude anything from the start. And it kind of just went dormant after I took some time off, but it kind of really started this whole journey that I had for now, which is crazy to think, almost, let's see, 4 or 5 years of dealing with this. And so from there, basically I get a couple months, be fine, and then all of a sudden have this nerve flare up where one part of my body would just be in like incredible amount of pain. But what's weird about nerve pain, I don't know if you've experienced nerve pain before, it's an odd thing, because if you're used to dealing with pain, you know that like when your foot is on fire because it's, injured because you broke it, you can't move on it. Where when you have nerve pain, it's one of those things that's like, I could probably keep going on it, and it's the threshold, like how much you can really, deal with. And so you're thinking, is this too much? Am I making it worse?
And then you couple that with being an athlete.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
wanting
Yeah.
to push through.
Push through and things like that. And so I think what ended up eventually happening for me is like I would push through the pain, and then I'd start compensating on other sides of my body. So then you get hurt on the other sides. And then I started falling a bunch. And so I was doing a lot of falling, because when I wasn't having a lot of pain, I was dealing with a lot of numbness and just like not able to stay on my feet. And
this would be relentless, like constant?
It would be constant, and then it would kind of go away. I'd take some time off exercise and it'd go away. And so I had this one period of time after my first flare up, and I got in the gym, got really dedicated to strength training, had the best, strength training, sequence of my life, was able to kind of recover from what I was dealing with in that first spring of 2021. And I decided to do something that I would never really suggest to most of my athletes, is sign up for a marathon. And my reason for it at the time was I felt like for some reason in my head that this could be the last time that I feel this good. And I just dealt with this huge thing last spring that was so unknown. I kind of wanted just to kind of go off on a bang and do something and go for it. And so I had an amazing training cycle for about 12 weeks leading into the Houston Marathon, and ran a PR there and had an awesome race and was healthy, and never been more grateful and just appreciative of just being there. It wasn't even about running the time. It was about just being there, being healthy. And then a couple of weeks later, had another flare up, and so exactly. And since then, I've never been able to find like consistency in the sport. So fast forward about a year or two later, I'm still having issues, gone to tons of doctors, have, conflicting multiple diagnoses of what's going on. And I start noticing, this was about a few months before I got married. So I got married in the fall of 2023. It's probably about maybe springtime of 23, right before probably about the time I met you. At that point, I was at this point, I had to totally shut down from running because I was falling too much, and just decided, what am I doing? Why am I trying this? We have the team, we're growing these things. Let me just focus on my health. And I'm taking time off running, which usually would help, where I just cross train and things like that. But I noticed that now my neck is starting to bother me a ton, and then I was getting bad headaches, and I wasn't able to like really like just like do my job normally. Like I was like, this is affecting like just like being at a computer and all the rest of the stuff. And then it got to the point where I was getting like it wasn't like dizzy per se, but I was getting this like almost lightheaded in my head, and this real bad tightness in the back of my like neck, basically like right under my brain. And I was like not able to keep my head up. And then if I laid down, I would have issues. It was just all these weird spiraling things that were happening. And so long story short, I expressed this to my doctor. He does this kind of maneuver test, and did a re-MRI and looked at it, and he diagnosed me with what they call a CSF leak, which is, from what I'm described to, is just there's a leak in your spinal cord.
Wow.
Yeah. And so from there, they said, okay, you're going to go on this medicine, you're going to try this. And then I got a blood patch months later. And a blood patch is basically where they take your own blood, and then they patch that through your spinal cord, and then hopefully it patches up. So that's kind of, I know that's a long spiel,
And
but
that's successful.
So at first we thought it was, and then a few months later started to have some issues. And so what I've found in the last couple of years is that I'm on some new medicine that kind of helps with general nerve pain. And I've just realized that if I go up in frequency of running too much, I have too many issues. And so I've just had to kind of live and learn with what I'm dealing with, and hopefully at some point I'll get more answers, of what maybe is going on. Maybe there is something else besides just having the CSF leak. CSF leaks they usually, a lot of times they do come back and people have to get multiple patches. So that could be a possibility. So that's kind of where I'm at with things. And so it really the only reason why I'm able to fight and grind through it with a positive attitude is because of how much I fought through my own training career with adversity. That was the entire time I was ever running well. I was always dealing with adversity. And so it's not anything different for me.
Right.
And now I'm just kind of letting go and saying, you know what?
Like any small business.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's been my journey, and that's where, kind of where I'm at.
Wow. So how does that resiliency, or how does that inform your coaching, or how do you bring that to your athletes that you're working with? And I want to talk about the organization a little bit, because now you've got 12 coaches, I think, within the org. You've built this great community in many layers of the word that I want to talk about too. But how does that resiliency kind of come across on how you deal with people individually? Yeah,
I think, for me, I've had to really, first and foremost, take my story and, everybody's got something that they deal with. And, for example, when you started working with Coach Jamie, if a coach doesn't have empathy for your schedule and what you have going on in your life and, the things that you go through, it's really hard to coach an adult, because everybody has some type of circumstance that they kind of go through. And so I think when I first started coaching, it was so much just about X's and O's and about being successful, and this is how I train, and this is how you should train, and almost that kind of no excuse mentality, where I think what I went through in terms of injuries, setbacks, or seeing people's kind of lifestyles, I've just learned to have more empathy for people's kind of personal health. And that's really something that's probably the most important for me now when I coach somebody is, of course, I want to help them reach their goal, but I am never afraid to be I am training you at a recreational level, so I'm not going to put this race over your long-term health and success.
Right.
The thought process for me, and that's how all of our coaches work, is that we're going to prioritize your health and wellness. So if it's the decision between, your, for example, we just had a coach last week pull one of her athletes out of a half marathon. He was the week of the race, his goal race, he had a calf issue, and it was a easy choice for her to say, nope, you're not going to do it. Because yes, we could flip the card, and in most sports, you go out there and you do it because that's what you train for. But for us, it's it's not just about training for these races, but it's about knowing that person's going to probably want to run again in 6 months, in another year. And if they want to be successful long term, they're going to have to make smart choices. And we were kind of talking in the beginning about how people feel about running and how it is a wear and tear on your body. I think a lot of people get to where they get to, and we've seen it a lot where there's runners who just can't do it anymore because for years they kind of pushed through all the different stuff and then it caught up to them. And so that's so much of my philosophy. And I think because of what I've dealt with, I'm very, very, very conservative now when it comes to thinking about people's long-term health and future.
Are all the athletes so you guys aren't coaching professional runners, or are there?
We coach some folks who are, I'd say, at the semi-professional level. I have one woman that I work with who has an opportunity to qualify for the trials at some point. And so they're not, there's nobody that we are working with that are getting paid per se to run. They're only getting paid by winning, stuff at local races and things like that.
So you really are building, and what you've built, which was so attractive to me, and the quick aside story for me is I was running just recreationally at the Clayton track because it's not too far from my house, and once a week this group would come, and you were just so positive. And at one point I just walked up to you, I think, and said, what the hell is this? What is going on here? And you sort of explained this community that you had built, and it's kind of a combination of runners that are coming for community that somewhat coach themselves and just use it as a running training group. And then you also have all of the athletes that your team is coaching. I mean, how do you define community when you think about it in terms of Spewak training and Spewak racing, which are sort of the two different sides of what you're doing?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like, and first, like, I think to answer that question, like a big part of like what we're trying to accomplish, especially with the Spewak racing side of things, is to get people together to run, but to leverage great people and work together to do greater for the community. And so we started the racing team because I had my coaching business. We're going to have our 10th birthday this coming fall. And so at this point, I think we had the business for about 6 years or so. And then COVID hits, and we realized during COVID that there's a lot of people that wanted to be a part of community and be connected, but at the same time, they maybe didn't necessarily need coaching. And so throughout COVID, I had done a ton of virtual running series, a lot of stuff online that was just fun ways to connect my clients. And the main reason was I need to keep my clients moving throughout that process, because I realized that one is they're going to get back to training when races come back, and I don't want them to be out of shape. And second, if I don't have anybody training for anything, I have no clients, and then I'm going to have to pack up. And so that was one of the motivations to keep them going. But then another motivation was to raise money throughout that time and realize, like, I'd always tell people leading up to COVID, every client I talked to, I'd say, I'm always here for you. I always have your back. All these lines that you say to people on a daily basis, no matter what happens, I'm always here for you. And then we hit COVID, and I'm looking at myself and I'm like, are you going to be a fraud? Or are you going to be a real person? So that's when we started coaching people for free. That's when we started to think about, like, what can I do? Instead of thinking myself as a business owner, I was thinking myself as like a support system to my clients and the people that we were working with, so that we could keep them moving. Because of course, our clients, it's a different, we don't sell, our product is different. We sell fitness to people, and we keep them moving. And then that fitness keeps them happy and healthy in so many areas of their life. And so I didn't want to see people lose opportunities to be healthy because of, what was going on with the circumstances. Sure. And so all that to be said, we raised tons of money throughout COVID for different charities and things like that. And so once we felt comfortable, it was the spring of 2021, early summer. Once we felt comfortable bringing people back together, we said, I think there's a need for a club that's not necessarily like our own, like we wouldn't really be like adding to our own coaching business, do something separate that you just join a team. And then in addition to that, we raise money for charity because people really resonated that during COVID. And then we bring people together, and it's kind of all this, 3-in-1. And that's really motivation.
From my own experience, a very nominal fee. I think it's $100 a year to join Spewak Racing. You have 3 or 4 organized training events every week. You send out a great newsletter. I think it's on Sundays. You send it out. Here's what's coming on this week. You can pick and choose what you can make, what you can't make. But, there's 50 to 75 people, it feels like, every time that you go out in this group. There's all different levels, so you don't have to be some really fast person. You can always find a group with which you can run. You move it around St. Louis or St. Louis County for the most part, a little bit in the city with Forest Park, and it's just a great community. And then you raise all those funds, and so it's really neat to see that community that you've built. And I mean, it was super impressive to me, and I think you're just such a positive force in the world, bringing all those people together and putting on these events that you're putting on. We're going to talk at the end about the Ladue Dogwood Run, because we're kind of sponsoring that with you, and we're super excited about that, benefiting the Ollie Hinkle Foundation. So the other side of it is the coaching business. Yeah. And you've got 12 coaches. I mean, you've got a real, I don't want to say that single coaches aren't real businesses either, but I mean, that's an organization and a lot to manage. Yeah, no, I appreciate that a lot. And I think, like, for me, with the coaching business, when I first started it, it was about myself coaching and helping people, and I was coaching high school at the time, and it was kind of just like, not to say it was like a side job or whatever the case was, but it really kind of was. It was something small. I was working at Big River. I was putting on charity running events. I was going to school part-time, and then at night I was doing my coaching. And I read it was just you sort of talking to somebody about some shoes. And ended up being
It very much led from Mike Miller, a great guy who came into the store one day. He owned his own company. He owned this really cool company. It was called Titanium Strength, and what they did was he would sell like fitness equipment to gyms and universities and things like that. And he was a hustler. He was a sales guy. He walks in. We're really busy at the store, but ingrained in me. And one of the reasons why it was ingrained in me was I think I had like maybe there was like early on there was somebody that sent a negative comment about like their service with me at one point, and it was like I didn't go through the full fit process or whatever the case was, and so my manager pulled me aside and said, hey, you didn't do this. And so from that day, because whenever you get negative feedback,
Sure.
especially as a salesperson, I'm sure you can relate to this in your business. You're freaking out, and of course I never wanted somebody to have a negative experience, and so I was so ingrained in giving the best experience possible for anybody that walked in that door so that would never happen again. And he comes in on the busiest day. We have the St. Louis U high school team in there getting their shoes, and it is crazy. And he comes in, he just says, I just need a refill on these shoes. And I said, well, totally fine. Would you be okay with us still giving you the full service? Like, it's just gonna have to be patient because we have a lot of people. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. And he ends up I ended up realizing he was in the wrong pair of shoes and got him in another pair of shoes. And he walks out so happy, and he immediately calls the store, I think a few days later, and he comes by the store and he's asking about me. And so we just developed this friendship, and that's when he was like, you should start, coaching me. I need some help. And then he was the one that was like, you need to start a business. And I was like, coaching? Like, that seems weird. And then when I said, I'll work with a few people for free, and then if it's successful, we'll start the business. And we did. And then I always find it funny when I'm talking to him about, like, I think I'm going to start this business. And he's like, yeah, you got to do it. I'm like, I don't know what the name should be. And he's like, well, use your name. And I'm like, no, I do not want to use my name. He's like, you have to use your name. And so I listened to him, and I trusted it for better or worse. And that's kind of all developed. And so starting off with the business, like, I was very focused on like, just doing the job and helping people. And then we brought on a few coaches. Our staff continued just to slowly build as the years went on. And then it was COVID that really separated us, I think, because, we did some extra stuff in COVID that brought in some new community, members with our virtual series and different, income streams with just the series and things like that we were putting on. And so that kind of inspired me to take an even another step in the business. And I got to a few years ago and I realized, okay, if I have what I'm doing, great income, great way to make a living, but it's not a business. It's myself coaching people. It's a job. And I'd love to see this become a business at some point. And so I said, I have to invest in good coaches, and I have to invest in kind of putting myself in a position where we can scale, but do it effectively, that it wasn't so fast and so rapid that we would dilute like our services. And so I use the example of like, you think of like Schnarr's hardware store. You go in there, you're going to get great customer service. This is not a plug, by the way, but you're going to get great service. They've been around forever. Anybody that's working there, they have a high knowledge for that. Their products are the same products you can find probably other places, but there's that personal touch that you get from them, and that makes you feel really good. And that's kind of how I define my coaching business. Instead of saying we want to be on every block, we want mass amounts of people coming through and hundreds of coaches. No, I just want to be that kind of hardware store that can have really good customer service, really devoted to our clients, and that when you come to us, you feel very committed. And so that's when I just kind of started focusing on doing the best I could to bring on new coaches, develop them. And now, we're going obviously into our 10th year, and I feel stronger than ever. And we've been able to really grow their lists of people, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I want to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to understand some of the challenges with that scaling and how you find those people and making sure that those values align.
Great.
Did you know that businesses can help protect our planet with every sale? That's the idea behind 1% for the Planet, a global movement where companies pledge 1% of their top-line revenue to environmental causes. Since 2002, members have given nearly $700 million to nonprofits tackling critical issues like climate change, conservation, and food insecurity. At Companion Baking, we're proud to be a part of this mission in 2025. We're contributing through local partnerships, like donating $50,000 in baked goods to the St. Louis Area Food Bank and supporting regenerative agriculture through our partnership with ADM. Learn more about how 1% for the Planet is driving change at 1%fortheplanet.org. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about, you know, you've got these values that you hold sort of dear to you in terms of, as you were just talking about, in terms of the way you want this philosophy to be, the level of attention that you want to have, and commitment to your athletes. How do you find, or has it been challenging to find those other coaches to sort of bring into the stable to build? Because I mean, as we talked about before, you're up to 12 coaches in this group. I mean, it can't be easy. Some of them probably have their own independent businesses. So what attracts you to them, and what attracts them to you, I guess, and how that all comes together?
Yeah, absolutely. And full disclosure, I'm a big fan of the show, you know, the Baked In podcast. So I listen to pretty much all your episodes. And like, what I admire so much about you is I hear about like how much you care about your entire process in terms of things that, you know, maybe most CEOs wouldn't think that way, you know, in terms of, and that's kind of how I view my coaching business. Obviously, we're much smaller, but I think like I'm very guarded and protected about who I bring in. But at the same time, like, and something that was so fascinating when I heard your podcast with your sister Jody was when she was talking about like the retention rate of the amount of people that are continue to come back on her staff. And that inspired me so much, because it's like, that is the most important thing for me, for our staff, is like not just, you know, to grow and get more coaches, but to get coaches that are committed, that really believe in the same values as me, and ones that we can grow with for many years to come. And so we get all of our coaches have other jobs. They might be teachers.
I was going to ask that. So
yeah,
this is
teachers.
The second gig for everybody.
Yeah, one of my coaches, she's a VP of a major health company, you know, and you know, this is the least paying job that she could probably get, and I know this is like the most important thing, you know, in her life. That's how much she cares about the coaching aspect. So a lot of them are teachers, a lot of them are coaches in other sports, you know, do different stuff, and they're passionate about running. And so what I love about that is they all have about a certain amount of number of people they can work with. And so how we grow with them is we think about, okay, when I first bring them on, it's a whole onboarding process where they work with a client for free. In exchange with that client, we need just, you know, feedback and them to kind of be a willing participant in that process. And once they've kind of been onboarded and shot into our coaching system, then I give them about 1 or 2 clients. We start off small and we just kind of try to build from there. And But
in terms of finding them in the first place, are these folks that you're interacting with in the running community, and you just say, hey, I'm looking to bring additional coaches on? Are you interested? I mean, are they already coaching?
Yeah.
Are they bringing athletes with them sometimes when they come, or? Hardly
ever is it somebody that we're pulling off that's already doing it. It's a lot of times I'm convincing somebody to do it.
Really?
So
so this is their first coaching.
Absolutely. I'll shout out Caitlin, because Caitlin's just such an amazing story. And so I coached Caitlin for many years. She's a dental hygienist, mom. Her husband owns a very successful chiropractic business, Active STL. Just great people. And
you're so good about getting the spots in here.
Oh yeah, you know, gotta make sure there's shout outs, you know, there. And so Caitlin is just like one of those people that is so encouraging. And when I email my clients each week and I give them their training plans, you know, maybe 30% of them write an email back. You know, a lot of them just get their training and they go do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Caitlin's the one that says, thank you so much. I'm so excited. Check in with her on Thursday. She's got the answer for me. She's pumped she's involved in the process. And so she and I kind of talked, and we've become friends over the years. And I just realized that she wanted to do something, you know, in the fitness space. She really loves helping people. And so I was like, Caitlin, like, I think you'd be a really good running coach. And I think when I first told her that, we were out drinking actually at Fraser's in Lafayette Square. And I think she was like taken off a little bit, like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then I think it really clicked for her. I remember we both had to go to the bathroom, and like we were walking the hallway, and I was like, so are you serious about this? And seeing her develop has just been amazing, because when it comes down to it, the skills of a good coach is somebody who is attentive, who cares, I mean, our process, as you know, is like you need this training plan to come out consistently. It needs to come every Sunday. You can't miss weeks. There's no excuses for dropping the ball because you own this relationship. And so one of it is you just need somebody who is really good at like handling people, investing, themselves in that person's success, and then somebody who's positive and they're encouraging, and then of course there's the passion of running, and then the rest we can teach them, and so she got her certification for coaching, and then she's a part of this mentorship program with me where I'm helping her with the X's and O's and the training. And so that's how I'm looking for people, is like, of course, like if there's a really good coach that's out there and there's an opportunity to bring them in, would love that. But for me, the most important thing is that I'm finding people who are good humans, who care about the sport and want to see other people be successful. And I think that's what probably is the number one thing that I'm looking for in terms of growing coaches.
And then how do you match clients to coaches? Is it all about sort of attitude and goals? Is it the X's and O's, or what are you using sort of to say athlete A would be a great fit for Coach B?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so for what I'm trying to do when I do our introductory call, especially with an athlete that's inquiring, and for so many years they were just going to work with me. We had Jamie was like one of our other coaches really early on, and so Jamie was just going to get anybody that said the word ultra, anybody that said the word trail, you're going right to Jamie. And as the years kind of went on, we brought on obviously a more diverse coaching staff that can kind of coach a lot of the similar things that I'm coaching, and Jamie does an amazing job coaching what I coach. It's just that was her specialty with the ultras and things like that. And so when it kind of boils down to that like introductory call, I'm asking a bunch of questions, and then I'm thinking in my head during this call, like, ooh, this person really reminds me of, Jared, who works with Dan, or whatever the case is. And I ask questions like, do you prefer, working with a female coach, a male coach? What are important to you out of a coach? And that's kind of what's great about having a bigger staff now is when there's always a level of disappointment, and this isn't like to toot my own horn or anything. I just think that a lot of times people are referred to me because their friend had a really good experience, or somebody they know had a really good experience with me, because for so many years it was just me. And that's why we're trying to really grow.
Yeah, which is the
staff.
Challenge of being Spewak coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Training is that they're expecting Spewak.
Your
right?
name, exactly. And so what I've had to learn is, like, when I have that introductory call, really talk about the power of the stories of people that are doing so well with our other coaches. And then when, inevitably I have to kind of break the news that my list is full, I say, but, if you want to start immediately, we have an amazing staff. And there's actually one coach that I want to reach out to, I think is going to be an amazing fit for you. It just happened last week where this woman was talking about how she's going to do the New York Marathon, and she had just the best mindset about what her future in running was going to be. And I was like, that client would be perfect for Jill. And I watch Jill every week. I'm like, she will crush it, and she'll do a better job than I will do. And so that was so fun, because then I know that's the right matching. So instead of just being like, okay, I don't have room for this person, and they're just going to work with my first available coach, I'm very selective. And that's hard, I think, for our coaches at first, because I tell them it's a slow process to get clients, because I want them to stay with you. And I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I'm so grateful that our staff has bought into that. I say, it's going to take time for you to build people, but you're going to retain your people. And I don't want an opportunity where you get working with somebody and then you resent them and you don't like them and you're not a good match. And so I take it very seriously, and I think our coaches do appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it sounds very similar to what we do in a custom, like just what you said. It's about listening, right? It's about asking enough questions and listening intently, or listening with intention to put folks together. No different than what you mentioned at Big River when you're talking to somebody about shoes. Like, you've got to make sure that you're truly listening to them and not just fielding a call and to your first available coach or something like that. It's super. All of these things become the same, right? Like all of these conversations that I get to have. I mean, people are just, business is in many respects very similar. So what advice would you give to people? I mean, I think you've built a culture. I think I read on the website, and I don't know if it's updated, that you've got 50 people that have qualified for Boston.
It's now more. Higher? Yeah, it's more now.
So you've obviously built a high-performing team of recreational, amateur athletes and coaches. How do you build that community of high performance, but still be community focused or value driven. Is that a challenge, or what advice would you have for folks that are trying to balance those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I think a lot of people sometimes get scared when you say things like be competitive, and reach for the stars and be your best, because I think that can sometimes turn people off. But what we're trying to show is that it doesn't matter what ability or level you are. Every person that's doing this has the opportunity to improve. And so our competitive mindset is about helping you get the most out of yourself, so that it doesn't really matter where you start. It's obviously where you're finishing. And so Boston's obviously always a great way to show success with what we do in terms of the recreational side of things, because that's how most people, that's really where the buck's going to kind of stop for most people in terms of their goals as adults, because that's kind of like the People's Olympics. So that's a goal, obviously, that a lot of us are working towards. But I'm really passionate, and that's why we started our racing team, just helping people improve and knowing that you don't have to be a certain speed to get there. And so I actually feel like I coach my top athletes better because of a lot of things that I've learned from working with athletes that, aren't at that level. And then vice versa, you're able to pick a lot of different things from a lot of different people. And so the advice I really just give to people, in terms of going after things is our coaching is individualized. It's 100% for the person, and the goal is just to help you improve, and that every person has an opportunity to get better.
What do you think sets apart the people that are successful with that, regardless of their speed or of their running ability, but just the people that are able to hit the goals, to continue to move, to push through, and all of that?
There's two things. So one is, and I say this, I've just got off the phone last night with a guy about this, is be very strategic in how you plan your race schedule. The people who are strategic about planning their race schedule and their goals are successful, dependent on if they follow through and they do smart training and they trust the process. But what I see so often is people work really hard, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're working very smart. And so they might not see a lot of success because they put 4 races on their calendar for a year that are all marathons, don't give themselves enough time to recover between them, and inevitably get hurt for 2 of them, and then they're set back for the next year or whatever the case is. And so much of it, I think, is
it inevitable for older athletes that working dumb or working not smart means overtraining? I mean, is that essentially what we all do to ourselves,
think that
without the benefit of a coach?
I think anybody that's willing to do this, for yourself, you get up at 4 a.m. to do this, Josh knows this, there are not many people on the roads when he's out there besides a couple people driving. And so when you see somebody else that's out there at 4 in the morning, I can guarantee you, even if they don't have a coach, they're serious about it. And so I think that any person that, even without a coach, that has the willingness to do this year round and get it consistently is going to overtrain, but not in a negative way. It's just that's the goal. That's what's so cool about it. And a coach is the person that can kind of ring them in and say, because I'm imagining for you, it's harder maybe some days for you to take a day off, possibly, or for some athletes, they need a coach for the day off.
Yeah,
they don't need a coach
absolutely.
for the motivation.
Right.
They need somebody to say, you know what, it's okay if you don't run on Mondays or you don't work out on Mondays, and that could be the difference for it. So I think overtraining, it's a word that scares a lot of people, and I think that everybody inevitably will overtrain, because if you think about it, how could you not overtrain unless you're a high school kid or college kid with no other responsibilities? If you have a full load of things that you're doing, you're working, you have kids, all the rest of the stuff, even the base level of training is going to be at that point of tipping you over the edge if you're not great at nutrition, you're not great at recovery, you're not great at sleep.
Yeah, none of us give credence to the other stresses in our lives that contribute to that downfall.
Absolutely.
You just kind of push those aside and you say, okay, working out is this part, and work and family is something else, and there's no interrelationship between them, and that's complete BS, right?
And that's the biggest thing. So when we sit somebody down, we say, we're going to factor in your life stress and all the rest of those things. And so I look at it like this. You come to me and you say, Mark, I could run 7 days a week. And then I ask you, so do you work on your feet? What's your job look like? You trap. Of course, they're willing to run, which is so cool that they're willing to do stuff even though they're busy. But then I'm thinking, wait, but you were in Omaha last weekend for your kids' soccer tournament. You're going to Wichita this weekend. You're going to go on family vacation next week. So I'm really realizing they're not available 7 days for healthy training. They're available maybe 5 of those days, and we're probably going to need to modify that week that they're on vacation, because even though vacation is relaxing, they're a parent, so it's probably not relaxing, probably long days, long hours. And so, yes, like that is the most important thing. And if you don't have a coach who is not invested in balance, like factoring those things, you will not be successful. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. There's a lot of high achieving people that are like, listen, I'm going to do this at all costs and no matter what. And I think you just have to, unfortunately, let those people kind of learn that lesson for themselves.
I mean, more is always better, right?
You try, but the work ethic, I said this to a guy yesterday on the phone. He wants coaching, and he's been hurt a lot, but he's got a lot of potential. He's somebody that could get better. And he's been injured a lot because of overtraining. He was actually diagnosed from his doctor as overtraining syndrome. And I said to him, I'd rather work with you than somebody who I'd have to be convincing just to be motivated, because you're not going to change that person. But with him, he's receptive. He wants a coach. He wants to get better, and he doesn't want to be injured. We can fix that. He'll be really good.
But I mean, I guess the beauty of what you're doing, though, is that, I mean, if somebody over 40 is calling you asking for coaching,
correct?
They're
Yeah,
pretty motivated.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
you sort of created
Yes.
the filter just in the creation of that conversation. But what you mentioned earlier as it related to yourself with strength training, and I don't want this to be a fitness conversation, but I always like to ask the questions that help me. Like, as an athlete over 40, where do you put strength training into the whole thing? Like, is it something that
number one,
more than running, more than
absolutely? And I know a lot of runners will get upset with this, because they're like, oh, you gotta run more. And overall health, longevity, everything, if you do not have an established strength training routine, you need to start. And that's where you start. And then you can supplement the running. And so I always tell people, hey, instead of training for a really intense marathon this fall, you just did your marathon, why don't we reduce the mileage you're running and bring strength training into your regimen? And then you'll actually be able to bring those miles up in 6 months, 8 months down the road, and it won't be this whole adaptation period that you have to go through right now. Is
it periodization of that, or do you view strength training as something that you should do X number of days a week all year?
Yeah, you obviously have to follow, the pyramid with running and with strength training. They're very similar, obviously. And when you're running at a high level, you can't be strength training, 4 or 5 times a week and doing X, Y, Z. So when you're in a training perspective, like when you're in that 12 weeks before your race, your strength training is really going to be in there to complement your running. And then when you're in your time where you're more in your base building phase for running, where you're not dealing with as much of the, harder demands of the running training, that's when you can kind of start ramping up the strength training aspect of it. But when it comes to just year-round health, got to have it, in your.
And what does that look like for your average athlete? Is that 2 hours a week? Is that 3 days? Like how do you program that?
It's so funny to me because I was, like I said, I was reluctant to doing it for years. When I was running 100 miles a week, I couldn't spend 2 days a week. You really just need 2 days where you do 30 minutes. Like, that's all you need as a runner. We're not going to the weight room to be bodybuilders. We're going in there to do specific things that are working on our balance, our hips, our glutes, our hamstrings. Like we're doing a lot of single leg work. When you run, you're never on 2 feet at the same time. So single leg strength training is so important for runners, because a lot of their injuries are, if you think about it, one leg's doing more work than the other, because the weaker one is not getting as much, the cadence isn't as high when they're running and things like that. And so much of the stuff, and then you obviously do core and some different stuff, but like so much of it is so small. And the routine that we have an amazing strength trainer. Her name's Krista Staley. She does, for our clients, a coach of our coaching services. We just brought this on. I don't know if you were still coaching with Jamie at the time, but we built a whole new strength training program with her. And she does a whole video series for our clients, as kind of a consultant for those folks. But here's the thing. It's like if a runner's never strength trained before, they are not going to want to do it, and you have to find like the simplest way. So she built a program for moms, basically in your living room. Just do this. So it's not a lot. You don't have to do a ton, but you got to do something.
Right. No, I started doing it a couple of years ago, and there's a shout out to Stu Beef from Output Performance. But
great guy. I
just love it. I think from the longevity standpoint, I mean, to me, that's really what, like, I listened to Peter Attia. He talks about, health span versus lifespan. How long can you be healthy, not just how long can you be alive. And if you want to be able to carry your groceries, and you want to be able to tie your shoes, and brush your teeth, and take care of yourself when you're older, here's the things that you got to do when you're in your 50s and in your 60s. So I think it's great. But I want to pivot just for a minute before we finish up, because I do want to talk about the Ladue Dogwood Run that you're sponsoring, which is coming up on May 24th. And we're supporting you in that. But tell me a little bit about the event, the motivation for it. Obviously, your mom is the mayor of Ladue, so there's a little tie there. But what's happening with this thing that weekend?
Yeah, so for many years, Ladue had a parade called the Dogwood Parade. You might be familiar with it, and it was I'd say I was actually just talking to your sister about it. Like I think there was some success with it, but I think towards the end, it was complicated. There was a lot of moving pieces, and there was COVID, and it kind of just dissolved from there. And if you look at all the communities around our area, they all have something that is like a celebration, a weekend that's, big for their town. And Ladue doesn't really have anything. And so I put on several events that are different charity events around town, and I'm always kind of looking for that next opportunity. And I pitched Jody, your sister, the other day, or not the other day, several months back. And I was like, what if we brought back the festival, but instead of doing the parade, let's do a run, keep it a shorter time frame, and then afterwards have this amazing kind of post-race party. And so Companion has been super gracious to be our post-race party sponsor. So the race is 3K, which is short of 2 miles. I like weird distances. I put on a mile race downtown, and I like just doing things that aren't just your traditional 5K. I think it's we do a 6K race out of Chain of Rocks Bridge. And so I find that fun because it's more about the uniqueness of the course and doing something that's more, I think a 3K is very inclusive to people that aren't necessarily going to run it. But this Ladue Triangle is fun because if you're on the soccer team, the cross country team, a lot of times when the soccer team practice, I don't know if this is how it was for you when you're in high school, but you'd have to run over to the middle school probably. That's how it was from the high school. So a lot of the people in Ladue have run this triangle where you're running from the middle school up Clayton Road to Warson, back to Conway, and then back to Companion. So it's a triangle. People walk their dogs there. There's a lot of foot traffic in that area already. And the proceeds of the race will benefit the Ollie Hinkle Heart Foundation. And that was kind of the next piece of it is like, let's do a really fun walk for the community, but then let's have a charitable aspect to it. And it was Jody who I credit for bringing in Ollie Hinkle because, we were looking for the right partner. And that's sometimes hard, because there's so many good charities that you want to work with. And she obviously already had a pre-existing relationship with them. But we also find it really appealing because the Ladue Business District, is looking always to expand their horizon outside the Ladue community and welcome in, new customers and show off just this amazing town. And I know that's the thing that the community is very passionate about. And so Webster is, so rich in that tradition. And so we're hoping that our two communities can kind of tie in together on that day too.
Yeah, it's great. How many, so where can you can still register now?
Yeah,
so.
the dogwoodrun.com. That's where you can find out all the information. There's a link for the website there.
What are you up to now in terms
of we're a little over 100 people. So it won't be the world's biggest race. I would guess that we get close to 300 people, which I think for a first year would be phenomenal. We're really trying to build
your community, just Spewak training, just the running community. How many do you have in there now?
We have for the racing team, we have 225 people on the team. And then for our coaching business, we have over 150 people that we work with. So
you gotta get them all out there.
Yeah, I know. It's easier said than done. I'm always asking them to do stuff, but yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. And then there'll be, after the race, several vendors, live music, very kid-friendly, dog-friendly, and just a whole party at Companion. So we're also encouraging people just to come up even if you're not running or walking in it. And it's really fun. The schools are getting involved in it. They're going to have a water station at the high school. The businesses have been so receptive. They've been awesome. We've walked door to door and talked to them about the event, and everybody's excited. Everybody wants to pitch in.
Well, I think it's great, and it's great to catch up with you. You're still one of my favorite humans, and my sister texted me after your meeting the other day, and she's like, "Is there anybody nicer than Mark?" But I really appreciate you coming on. I think you've built this wonderful business, and more than the business, you've built this incredible community of people, and your energy and positivity is making the world a better place. So thanks for doing what you're doing, and thanks for spending a few minutes with me today.
Well, thank you. No, that means a lot. And I feel so many great things about you and your family. And like I said, I listen to this podcast all the time. So when you reached out to me, I was like, how do I stay cool about saying yes? Because I'm like, of course. And I have so many friends that I've turned on to the podcast too. So I say what I love about the Baked In podcast, this is my plug for you guys, is that especially if you're like a business owner in St. Louis, and these are the celebrities of St. Louis business. You bring on everybody that is like the inspiration. So, and I want to shout out one of the episodes that you did, because I never in a million years would have thought I'd be super inspired, no offense, listening to a plumbing company for a podcast. And I was just like, whoa, this guy is so inspiring. Love it. And it's hilarious because the next day in my neighborhood, his truck's out there, and I'm thinking, oh, you can QR code, I think, on the truck, and he talked about this process, and I know that guy really cares about his people, whatever. So that's what's so cool about it. So thank you for having me.
Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks so much for joining me today. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed sharing these insights from folks I truly admire. Be sure and follow the show in your favorite podcast player to be alerted to newly released episodes. And share a comment if you have any feedback or future contributor recommendations.